want to say a few things about the book. And so many of you came in here tonight talking about, well, I just have to have this book. It's another Rick Warwick book. And I hear this all the time as special collections librarian. People love to collect local history books. And since we've had Rick as county historian, that has just tripled the amount of books we have to buy now. I think have probably tripled with Rick's efforts to get histories out there on our different communities, and we're grateful for that. I don't think you'll be disappointed in this book, Burwood and Beyond. I enjoyed working with Rick on it. I did the layout and editing in this book. Unfortunately, I'm not good at putting names with pictures. So just so you know, okay? This book is a remake and an enhancement of the original Burwood book, if you ever saw that. And that came out just prior to the statewide Tennessee homecoming celebration. Welcome, Judy. In 1986. It is primarily about the village of Burwood, but the Beyond part of the book encompasses the communities of Forest Hill, Sycamore, Sugar Ridge, and Evergreen. In his introduction, Rick states that Burwood has been an important agricultural center of the county. The fertile farms along the West Harpeth and Murphy's Fork were major producers of grains, livestock, and tobacco. The hilly western and southern sections of the 4th District were home to subsistence farmers who tilled their land to support their large families, much like their cousins in western North Carolina. From the hollows and slopes of the Duck River Ridge, Johnson Hollow, and Perkins Road came the soldiers for our wars, the workers for our factories, craftsmen and store clerks for the cities. Those who remained in the community became the backbone of the workforce of Williamson County. As you go through this book, I'd like for you to pay attention to the detailed table of contents. There are 9 sections in this book, and it starts with a history of the 4th District. We have churches, schools, the families of Evergreen, military, veterans, notable citizens, notable homes, tidbits. Now that's fun because these are just little bits that we didn't know where to put. There was not a real title for these, so we have a tidbit section, and then we have 4th District folks and familiar faces, and that is the photograph album in this book. I can tell you that Rick worked super hard to make sure every family was represented in some way in this book. And I hope you find that that's true. I hope you enjoy this book. It's been a pleasure working on it. And now I think it's a good time to turn this over to Rick. Thank you.
First of all, this book would not have been possible without that young lady right there. We have press books and Paige. The way this works, I would bring in the material. I'd already scanned the photographs, and then I would turn it over to her, and she would work her magic. And she also did the Bethesda book. And that was, I think, a success. I have to first mention that this book wouldn't have happened if it hadn't been for Judy Hayes. Judy was very supportive of the Bethesda book because she's of Grigsby, and that's where they come from. She also taught there. But she said, the Burwood book really needs to be reprinted. And I said, oh, yes, it does, because it's been out of print forever. And people want a history of Burwood. So I took the challenge, and you have most of the material that was in the first book. Some of it was repetitive, and so I tried to add to it as best I could. And of course, the photographs in 1986, when this book came out, there was computers, scanners, and all that was just not available. So we've tried to get as many of those original photographs, and we even scanned the photographs and corrected them the best we could. So I apologize if some of them are not as clear as they should be, but the originals were that way. Burwood and Beyond, and I can thank that title to also to Marshall, because I was working under the title of Burwood and Surrounding Communities, but Burwood and Beyond sounds so much more sophisticated because we'd use that same title in Bethesda, because like Bethesda, Burwood is the center of the 4th District. Now, when I started out, I was taking the whole 4th District, and I found as I went on, there was just too much material to take in Thompson Station. And I had a good bit of the material together, but we decided to cut that and just deal with really everything, starting at the West Harpeth River on Carter's Creek, right there at the old Kennard place, just past Coleman Road, and then going down through Forest Hill. You see the old school is still there on the left. Glen Overby's store, bless its heart, is melting away. And then Glen Overby's home is still there. And then you get on down to Perkins Road and the Leapers Fork Primitive Baptist Church, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But Perkins Road is a great road to travel if you want to take a Sunday afternoon. It's rather steep and hilly, but most of the 4th District is pretty steep and hilly, except along Leapers, along Murphy's Fork and West Harpeth. So now let's get into I went through the book and pulled out some things I just thought we needed to talk about. And this is the cover of the book, and you can see that is Charlie and Ken. And if you'll notice if you've got a book, look on the back, we were doing that day the cover so quickly that I told the girl laying it out, Peg, that it was Kenny and Ken. And when I got back, that's the first thing I noticed. But every time I do something, as soon as I open it up, I find out I've made a mistake. This is just a little map will show you of what we're talking about in case you're not familiar. Carter's Creek Pike is kind of the main line south, something like Lewisburg is on the other side of the interstate. But I had to do some digging at the archives and found that Carter's Creek Pike was a turnpike from 1850 until 1917. And then the county took it over. It had 2 toll gates, one out here at the quarry and one just across the road from the Leapers Fork Primitive Baptist Church, right there as you cross Murphy Fork. So there were 2, usually about every 5 miles is what the law allowed the turnpike owners to do. So here you see there's Burwood right in the center, and of course Thompson Station's off to the east. Leapers Fork is up to the north. But the little communities, Forest Hill, we're going to be talking about that. Sycamore and Johnson Holler are interchangeable because the school, what are you doing? Oh, okay, thank you.
Adjusting your microphone so it doesn't fall on you.
See, this girl's just wonderful.
How's that?
She'd make a good wife if any of you boys are innocent. She can do anything. Casey Springs, we'll talk about that. That is an important, a rich area just east of the village. The mineral springs there go back very early. It was Kerr Springs owned it originally, then the Caseys bought it, and it stayed there for several years. I think the hotel burned, but still people went there for the mineral waters. Today, it's been dug out, and there's a nice lake where the springs were. West End, we'll talk about that. That was a school that's still standing thanks to G.D. Hayes. And Sugar Ridge was really a black settlement up on the ridge. Usually after the Civil War, most of the areas that nobody else wanted was used by the African American communities. And usually it's full of cedar trees and rock. And that's what happened over at Evergreen between Burwood and Thompson Station. Okay, Spring Hill, of course, is there to the south. Isn't this a great picture? James Redford is responsible for this picture, but this is the Aiken Brothers store, and since 1937, it's been Huff's store. And it is a landmark. It is on the National Register of Historic Places. And it is the hub right in the middle of the whole community, and seemed like it always has been. Since it's on the road, it's at the forks of the road between Pope's Chapel and Carter's Creek Pike. But it's still active. I went yesterday and got good gas, $3.09 instead of $3.69 here in Franklin. Thanks to Charlie, he's giving us a break. They are the churches that are still active today in Burwood. The Leapers Fork Primitive Baptist Church is kind of an oddball because that church originally, it's probably the oldest church building in the 4th District. It originally was a Church of Christ, and the Church of Christ at Leapers Fork and the Primitive Baptist owned the church that's there in the village. And in 1916, the Church of Christ wanted total control of their church. And so they swapped the brick building over on Carter's Creek Pike on Murphy's Fork, and they moved there, and they've been there ever since. It's odd because the 2 front doors are on the side rather than at the end of the building. And it sits right there on the creek, and when the creek gets up, water gets in the church. So not very good planning there. The Burwood United Methodist Church is there, next to Huff's store, of course. And then we have Jones Chapel Nazarene Church over in Johnson Hollow, near what was called Sycamore. Lawrence Grove Baptist Church, which is sitting on the site of what was originally the Pope's Chapel Methodist Church. A tornado destroyed that building, and so then they moved into the village. And then, of course, we have Evergreen. It's the only active black church in the Burwood community. Murphy's Fork is kind of extinct, I think. There's no activity going on there that I could see. And, Burwood Church of Christ. They at one time was on West End, at West End, and then they moved over to Carter's Creek Pike to be, I guess, more the center of the community. The schools, we'll look at those extinct schools, the West End, and we're going to have a historical society meeting there in the short time, as soon as Brian gets the journal ready. And this is a marvelous 1885 school building. 1885. And it's a 2-room building, and Judy has spared no expense to make it look just like it would have when the school closed in 1915 or 16. I can't determine exactly the exact date. Forest Hill School, of course, it sits there right past Glen Overby store, and it in 1949, Miss Whitley, Gladys Whitley, was teaching there, and she said Mr. Scales came and said, okay, get your books, and the students were going to Burwood. So she left, packed up her things, and they went to Burwood, and the school's been sitting there forlorn ever since. The owner has taken care to put in and refurbish it. Looks nice from the road. Sycamore School, unfortunately, is no longer standing, and you can see there that's probably in the 60s. Or 70s, and it looks sad. But again, Mount Laverne, which is up on Sugar Ridge, Miss Lottie Ashworth taught there for years. And then Pearly Hill was a black school that was up near Sycamore, between there and Carter's Creek Pike. Burwood School. Isn't this a great picture? 1916 to 1956, and then they built the brick school, which was there from 56 until 76. That was a sad day. What happened, integration was not well received in the Burwood community in Thompson Station. And the enrollment dropped. We got a lot of children coming to Hillsborough that should have been going to Burwood, but they didn't want to go to Evergreen. And so the state really, Ken Fleming gets the blame for this. He was the superintendent, but actually the state education came down and said there's not enough kids to justify having the school there. And so those kids were sent to Hillsborough. Some of them, if they wanted to, I think could go to Bethesda if you lived over towards Thompson Station. It was a sad day because I had the job of moving all the books from the Burwood Library and bringing them to the Hillsborough Library. But we got the kids, and they were a great bunch. I see some of them here in the audience today, and they were a pleasure. They were well behaved, and they were just good kids. Here, Blue Ribbon Days, so we don't do this anymore, but the health department had a program, and they went to the country schools at the beginning of the year and told the children, you know, if you brush your teeth, if you do these things of taking a bath ever so often, and you check these off, and at the end of the year when you did that, then you got to be a participant in the Blue Ribbon Day, and you got a blue ribbon if you completed all that. And they played games, and here they're playing, these pictures came from the health department archives that I found, and they're out playing baseball. But the other one on you'll see there, that is Burwood's First Bus. I think LD Barnhill took an old flatbed truck and kind of built a cab on the back of it, and they had benches in there for the kids to sit on. And that was one of the first buses in the area. It was for Burwood. The county didn't start furnishing buses until about 1943 and 44. Before that, kids had to walk to school. Usually, they didn't want them to have to walk over 5 miles. But you imagine first graders getting up in the morning and plowing through the mud, and, well, that was Williamson County. We've done better now. Lost traditions. Burwood had a great tradition that went on for many years called the Ride-a-thon. And it was a great community event. Young folks, old folks, they went in a horse, and some of them went in wagons, and they would go into the back roads of the area. And it was just a wonderful day. They would have lunch after, in between the rides. You'd go on one side of the Burwood, come and have lunch, and then go to the other trail. But this was such a wonderful thing, and it's sad, well, it's probably not safe today to be on a horse in Burwood now with Carter's Creek so busy. But it's beautiful, beautiful thoughts, good memories. And then, of course, here we have R.H. Barker supervising the hog killing. And I suspect now there's probably not a hog killed in the 4th District. And at one time, it was one of the largest producers of pork at the Cannon Farm and at the Jones Farm right there at Perkins Road in Carter's Creek. Tons of pork and sausages and lard and all was made. And today, no longer. Tobacco, there was a big tobacco growing area. And here we have Ernest Davis and his boys out in the tobacco patch. That's probably on Bear Creek Road, but we'll accept them in this. And then, of course, the Tennessee walking horse. That was a big thing in the county. And men would train the horses and go to the shows on Saturday night to show their animals, and that's a thing that's no longer much. Burwood was a baseball-playing community, and the Huffs were right in the center of it. Mr. Huff was the manager for many years. You can see there in 1940 his team. And then, of course, if you know Rose Marie, this is her mother and father, and on one side, and Ken and Lou Huff on the other side. Even as a Burwood School had a good baseball team and a basketball team. This is there's somebody missing there. There's 9 people and there's only 8 names, and I've looked everywhere and I can't find it. If anybody can recognize somebody that's not named there, please tell me. But these boys are rough and tumble. They're ready to play. Okay, this is when the kids from Burwood came to Hillsborough, one of the first things I was fascinated with was their story of the Hawk brothers. Now, the Hawk brothers were like a legend in that area because in 1913, one Saturday, the 2 boys, they lived in Peckerwood Holler, and they walked down Carter's Creek Pike to the store. Now, it was Lavender's store at that time, which is not Ken Huff's store. It was the one in the back next to where Charlie used to live. And they told everybody to get out except Lionel Johnson. Everybody got out, and they filled him full of lead, and they just got the store and walked back home. Well, they called the sheriff, and the sheriff came out, and they got the bloodhounds, and they ran all over the 4th District trying to find those boys. Well, they had gone over the ridge to Boston, and their aunt, Miss Sparkman, let them stay in her upstairs room for 2 weeks. And then they decided, well, it's getting warm, we better get out of here. And they had a sister that lived up in Kentucky, so they got the big idea, we'll go to Waverly and get on the train, and then we'll get up to Kentucky and we'll be safe. Well, someone found out about it, and they told the police in Nashville, and the police in Nashville got on the train and went to Waverly and waited. The boys got on the train, and they just rode up to Nashville and then brought them to Franklin. They stood trial. They were found guilty. They were sent to the pen, and then World War I broke out, and so they joined the Army. So they may have served 4 or 5 months at best. They came back to Franklin. One of them lived out here at Lyndhurst, and the other one went to Nashville. So those boys didn't get what they deserved, I'm sure. But the story goes on. Their side of the story was that Lionel Johnson had whipped up on their father, Mr. Sam Hawk, and it was coming back to pay him back for what he did. I don't know how many shots there were, but it sounded like they were emptying their gun. This is a great story. These 3 men, sons of Burwood, surely, were all 3 prisoners of war in World War II. I talked to Rebecca Jackson, and she said her brother Calvin really never got over it. Southall, he wrote a book about his experiences, and Mutt Huff left, engaged to be married to this girl, and he went off and got captured, and when he got back, she had married someone else. Sadly, he never married again. He lived right there in the village, across the street from the store. But kind of a sad thing. War is terrible, but to be a prisoner of war under terrible circumstances is something else. So these guys need to be remembered. I've also got a section in there. I tried to find as many photographs of the soldiers of World War I, World War II, Korea, Vietnam, and so you'll find that in one chapter. Do you all like that cartoon? Say, listen, I'm from Burwood. Well, Miss Ruby Dodd drew that, and she had a scrapbook. Sam let me look at it, and this was one of there's several of her drawings are going to be out throughout this book. But isn't that great? Now, she was 1913. She was about 13 years old when this was drawn. And, of course, Marcia did her magic and put a border on it. But I just love it. She's got the depth. Everything's there for a young girl. And, of course, that's Miss Ruby. She was almost one of the last old-timers in Burwood, the ones that would have remembered when the school started and when the churches were moved and all this. Sam is the only one living, and I called him, and he brought his mother's scrapbook and a bunch of photographs, and they're found throughout the book. So Sam Allen Dodd is to be thanked. Billy and his sister Sue makes a beautiful family. These are 3 pictures that I selected as being my favorites. Sam and Neil Barnhill are hoeing. I think they're posing. They wouldn't be working that close together. And look at the hillside. That's probably corn in the background. I don't know what's they may be just be planting seed. But I think that's such a great scene, and that was so common in all over Williamson County. You had to have a hoe to get the weeds out. Polly McCampbell, Glenn Overby, and my dear friend Vernon Beard. I met Vernon and Leah Beard. They lived right before you get to Glenn's store, and they were the nicest people. They were so friendly, and we had such good times. Polly, of course, was a cook, and then when Burwood closed, she went to Franklin High School, and of course, she was a Huff. This is probably one of the outstanding families of Burwood. Annie Lou Barker Grigsby taught school as long as she was able and did a bang-up job. Starting out in a little one-room school, she taught at Forest Hill. She taught all the little schools and finally got to Burwood. And, of course, Mr. Grigsby came from Bethesda and married. And Judy, I found the deed. Your granddaddy sold the place to Anna Lou for $1 in 1948. Of course, they'd already put money on it, I'm sure. And then, of course, you got the little prince and princess over there, Jack and Judy. But as I said, this book wouldn't have gotten off the ground if it hadn't been for Judy Hayes. Neil Barker family. Neil was a postman out of Thompson Station for the Burwood area. He went off to World War II and came back and became the postman and on up until he retired. And I have never heard an unkind word about Neil Barker. He, again, lived right there in the village across from the store. And Burwood was full of those kind of folks. The Huff family, of course, have been numerous and, of course, in the commerce there at that store since 1937. This is Mr. Robert and Hattie Jeanette Huff and their family. And, of course, the boys were all into the grocery business at one time. Mutt, of course, was the county sheriff for on and off during the 50s and the early 60s. And, of course, there's Robert, Ken, and the dad in the store. And today the store hadn't changed much. The goods are still on the wall, and you have to pull them off. This is probably one of my favorite photographs of all of them. This is Kane Pope, who lived up there in Johnson Hollow. Later Ferris Huff owned it, but that's definitely an early house. You've got a dog trot with the opening in the center between the two. It does have weatherboarding over it, and it also has wood shingles, wood shakes, which tells you it's, those people used what they had. And there are the names. This is a great photograph. And this is another great photograph. Don't you love the old car? You know, animals and automobiles really make a picture. You got a little dog or a puppy or a cat or a horse, cow, a lamb, that makes it. But when you got an old car like that, and there they are sitting on the bumper, and those are all kin folks, and they all come out of Johnson Hollow. Really, probably in the 19th century, the Aikens were kindly a step above of some of the others. And this is James Bruce Aiken, and he's on the end, and he was in the Civil War. And of course, his two sons, R.V. and Millard, started the Aiken store. That house is still standing. It doesn't look that way today. This is another one of my favorite pictures. You see the log structure in the background. That's probably a smokehouse. And I was so glad to see a picture of Gus Sparkman. He lived where Patsy Jones lives today, and great photograph. The Joneses of Johnson Hollow, just look at them. And I didn't want to pick on any of them, but I thought these were good. Mr. Bill Jones is there, and then his family is there, and of course, Patsy's there. And then, of course, when you get into Johnson Hollow, I couldn't keep up whether they were on this side of the ridge or they were over on the Boston side of the ridge, because I know the Hassels are over on lower the west side, weren't they?
They're both.
Yeah. And these are some great pictures of families. You've got, and when in the write-up, in the beginning, introduction to the story, I said out of Johnson Hollow was where first ever, when the wars came along, they were the ones that had to go fight. Then when they came back, they were the ones that went to the factories here in Franklin or in Nashville and did the dirty work. And they raised large, happy families. I love this picture. Diane Carter's not here today, but she's the one who brought me this one of Rhoda Merritt Johnson and her beloved horse. And of course, Hiram Johnson was, again, he's a daddy of a lot of those Johnsons in the Hollow. He had 14 children, and this is just some of them. His poor wife, bless her heart. I'll tell you a story. My grandmother had 11 children, and Lane and I married in '69, and I had some cousins who were about the same age, and so we were all sitting on the front porch. My grandmother was in the swing. She had her little twig of snuff in her mouth, and my cousin Brenda announced to the family that she was trying to get pregnant, and my grandmother stopped the swing and says, "Trying to get pregnant?" She couldn't believe anybody intentionally wanted to be pregnant. The Barnhills are really not Burwood originals. They came from Craigfield. Mr. V.I. Barnhill moved from Craigfield over to Burwood, and they were all successful. Holbert's really the only one that I knew. He lived here in town, and he was a great guy. LD was, he had the bus. He did a lot of things, farmed, and he married Bessie Sparkman, and you see her over there. And then one of their daughter, Judy, and Bud, and of course, Jackie, Don, and Angie all went to Hillsboro, and just had to put them in there. And then, of course, Cliff Sparkman. Look at that smile on his face. He's got a tractor, and he's in hog heaven because he probably was plowing with a mule until he got the tractor. And then, of course, Bobby Sullivan and Hobart Barnhill with the rattlesnake. Yes, there's rattlesnakes on those hills in Johnson Hollow and even over at Casey Springs area. And that's a pretty good size one, isn't it? Faye Osborne, oh, I can see her now the first time she came to school in kindergarten. She was a sweetie. She now works at Halfway Market. And so I said, now, Faye, if you want your family in this book, you're going to have to bring me some pictures. Oh, yes, Mr. Warwick, I'll do it. Well, I went on, and finally I just said, Faye, if you don't give me the pictures this week, I'm not going to put you in there. Well, boy, she got ready. And so, sadly, Betsy died about a month ago or so she didn't make it. But Nellie works there, and Kate, and of course Harvey and Ott. They're all right there in the middle of Burwood. Right, 840 unfortunately took the birdhouse where they were renting. And Bill Osborne, he, of course, no telling how many tobacco patches he's worked in. That family were tobacco growers. And then over on the other side, you see Copperhead, he's a nephew. 3 Harris girls married 3 Osborne boys. So you've got 3 sets of double first cousins there, and each one of them had probably 10 kids, I don't know. So Hillsborough was full of Osburns at one time. And the name, I need to say, sometimes the name changes, and I used the one that I thought the original founder that came to town. Some of them spell it with an O, some spell it with a U. Okay, here are some more folks from Johnson Hollow, and these are Johnsons. And this is another case. I kept asking Mike and Monica, I said, you've got to bring, I want a picture of Harold and Martha. Well, right at the last minute, one day I went by there and they had it. So Harold worked for the county when I first came in 1971, and he was the guy that worked on all the gas heaters, and he was the one you wanted to call if you wanted it fixed, because he could do it. I like this picture. There's Ruby and Carl, and of course the other on the end is John A. Dodd, and he's the father of Rebecca Jackson, and that's where I got these pictures. Also, Ollie Sparkman Toodlum's mother Gertie is in there, and Tish. Just a great family, really humble folks. And they were the backbone of Burwood. Tandy Logan's not here today, but he was very helpful, and he lives at Casey Springs. His mother's house sits almost right at the edge of the springs. It's now a lake about the size of this room. Beautiful blue water. And of course, Raymond was his granddad, Ray was his dad, and then Amanda, who she came to Hillsborough too. And on the other side, I want you to look now. Sherry still looks like she's still in the 5th grade. But she had gone to high school. I wanted to be sure and give the black community in this book, because the 4th district is the only district in Williamson County that had 4 black schools and 4 white schools, and they were scattered. And apparently after the Civil War they stayed and worked on the farms of their masters before that. But Joe and Leslie Pope, they descend from the slaves of Reverend John Pope, who was one of the early settlers in Burwood. And we're putting up a historical marker for them on Casey Springs Road and Joe Pope Road, and Fannie Mae. And then, of course, Percy drove the school bus from that area and brought the kids to Hillsborough for many years. Miss Lottie Ashworth, She was really the only teacher I think they had at Mount Laverne up on Sugar Ridge. Ollie Burns, I've included a picture of him. He tells a great story thanks to Thelma Battle. She interviewed him, and he tells about his father helping Mr. Jones and Mr. Cannon kill all those hogs. I mean, they were like thousands of them. And so I want you to pay particular attention to his little story. And then, of course, Mr. Campbell, he had a daughter named Lucinda Rooker, and she taught school in this district for many years, and then she went to Nashville. And one day she came to see me, and she brought me a little sack of pictures and gave them to me. And they were really treasures, and that's one of her. Her father lived to be 101. This is the Lavender family. You know, in that little area of Burwood, you've got first the Popes and the Aikens. Samuel Aiken's house, which is after you go through the village and you make the sharp curve and you start going up the Duck River Ridge, over on the left is Sam Aiken's house. And in the road book of 1803, it talks about leaving Franklin and going to the house of Sam Dodd. 1803, and that house is still standing. The Lavenders, the Barkers, just amazing. Sparkman, Dodds, Tomlinsons. I feel like I know these people. Over here, the reunion, that's in front of Neil Barker's house. It's there. You can see the porch is just like that today. I think there's a log room inside that house. And of course, here's our buddies again. And that's it. There are some errors in there because people brought me. Pauline brought me a thumb drive that had 270 photographs on it. And that's why there's so many families out of Johnson Hollow, is because of her. And then Cindy Johnson went and picked up some. We had just a wealth of information there. And I was telling Judy, we're doing this because this may be the last in our generation, anybody attempting to try to accumulate all these photographs and put them in where everyone can have them. I'm sorry we don't have the books. You've heard of the Phantom of the Opera? Well, this is the Phantom of the books. You can, well, I'm hoping the books are going to come tomorrow, at least over the weekend. So probably, well, we've got your all's name and number. We'll get you a call. Maybe we'll meet like here at the library, make it quick for an hour or something. If you want to come during that time and get your book. If you want to come by my office, which is 112 Bridge Street in the old jail. If I'm not there, the girls will be glad to let you have the book. And then if you live in Burwood, next Saturday at 2 o'clock, I'm going to do this again, and then I'll stay there till 4 o'clock so people can come and pick up the book. I haven't talked to Charlie yet, but we'll probably try to have some books at the store. And then, of course, Halfway Market they've already sold. That's why you don't have any, it's because they sold 5 cases. Any questions? Yes.
I want to ask you about 2 people real quick. Where you showed those 2 guys that committed the murder.
Yes.
He said they hid in upstairs room of Sparkman. Was that Sally Sparkman?
Sally Sparkman, she was a hawk.
Was that Matt Sparkman?
Yes. Yeah, right there at Boston.
Okay. So she was Lucy Marlin's mother.
Yes.
Okay, now you showed a Jack Grigsby. My dad had a friend named Jack Grigsby.
Well, that's probably Judy's brother.
Same family as Franklin High School with my dad.
Yeah. Well, the Grigsbys came from Bethesda to sometimes come into Franklin. Anybody else? Yes, ma'am.
You know, Lavender Family
yeah.
that lived out there?
Yeah.
I worked with her.
Oh, did you?
And back.
So I say that Burwood furnished the backbone for all the shoe factory and Abcon and all those.
She pronounced it Burwood.
Yeah, all the factories, yeah. Anybody else? Yes.
Yeah, thank you for a great talk. And what do you think the black population was in the Burwood area compared to the white? Any idea?
Well, at one time, it was pretty populous. If you look in the census, I'm gonna say it's probably 60-40. A lot of those black families stayed there, and some of them are still there. I mean, the Beasleys still live over on Evergreen Road. What's happening in all our whole county is housing is becoming so expensive that when one of the old parents dies, the kids can't afford to stay there. They have to sell it and divide it up and then move on. And that's the way it is. The kids at Hillsborough, many of them can't live in this county. I'll say, where you live? And they'll say, oh, Theta or Santa Fe or Chapel Hill or Centerville. So the price of house and land has become so expensive that we have pushed out the families that made this county what it is. But they keep building houses.
How about the old Evergreen School? You mention that one.
Evergreen, yeah, there's there's an article in there about Evergreen Store. This county really, 54 was Brown versus Ferguson. We got, Brown, Kansas City, wasn't it? Integration, this county and city did everything possible, dragging their feet. So the school board came up with this grand idea. They were these little one-room schools in the southern edge of the county. And so they said, well, we'll build one school and send them there in this nice brick school. And they did, and it operated from 65, till 76. But then in 1967, the federal government said, you've got to integrate the schools. And so they come up with this idea, Evergreen will be for the elementary kids, and Burwood will be for the upper elementary. And what happened was, the whites didn't want to go to Evergreen, and the blacks really didn't want to come to Burwood. They wanted to be with their own kind. And the population, the enrollment got low. They were like 50-some kids in one school and 80 in another, and you can't have 4 teachers or 5 teachers and have that few kids. So the building is still there today.
I taught there in 1970.
Oh, you did? Wow. And I've got a picture of all the black teachers that were there when it first opened in 65. Okay, anybody else? Hey, Bonzi. Coming up, not too long, Bonzi's got a book coming out on growing up in Franklin, even though she lived
Out on Wacker Road.
on Walker Road on the farm, but she still come to town. And I've encouraged her, and she's been doing it. So we'll get it together. I encourage everybody to do that, because if you don't write it down and tell your story, somebody else will tell your story for you. So, an interview, if you got your mother or your grandmother still living, sit down and talk to them. I knew more about what the 19th century was like being with my grandmother than if I'd read all the books in the library, because she knew her mother had been in the Civil War. Her granddaddy died in the Civil War. So talk to your grandparents. As Lucille Johnson said, if you don't mention them, you're going to forget them, right? Dewey? Anybody else? Well, you all been a great class.